the choices you've made, the legacy you're building. But it's becoming increasingly clear that you're not interested in honesty. Meghan, just in playing the same tired game of deflect and insult. Meghan smirked and crossed her arms. Oh please, spare me this self-righteous lecture. You're just mad I'm not crying into your shoulder like the rest of your guests. The audience was dead silent now. The temperature in the room had dropped noticeably, and the camera zoomed in on Piers as he sat perfectly still, his fingers tapping once on the desk. Well, he said finally, his voice deceptively calm, I think we've given you plenty of time to show the world who you really are, and you haven't disappointed. Meghan arched an eyebrow and leaned back, clearly pleased with herself. Piers offered the faintest of smiles. Let's take another break, he said quietly, and the cameras cut to commercial, but not before they captured the glint of something dangerous in his eyes. When the cameras came back from commercial, the air in the studio was thick with tension, like a storm cloud about to burst. Meghan sat with her arms folded defiantly, and Piers, though still outwardly composed, had fire in his eyes. What started as a high-profile interview had turned into a slow-motion implosion, one that nobody in the studio would ever forget. The red light on the camera blinked back to life, and the audience, still hushed, offered a half-hearted round of applause. Meghan sat rigid in her chair, adjusting the sleeves of her crisp white blouse under the black blazer, her chin held high. Piers leaned slightly forward, his hands folded neatly on the desk in front of him. His trademark smile was gone, replaced by a taut line across his face. Welcome back, he said evenly, though his voice carried a weight that suggested this segment would be different. We're here with Meghan Markle, though it seems the conversation we hope to have tonight has taken quite a turn. Meghan rolled her eyes so dramatically that a few audience members actually gasped. Oh, don't act like you're surprised, Piers, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. This is exactly the kind of gotcha spectacle you live for, isn't it? Piers cocked his head slightly. Actually, Meghan, what I live for is asking real questions and getting real answers, something you seem determined not to give. Her lips curved into a smug smile. Maybe that's because your questions aren't worth answering. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed, someone else muttered, wow, under their breath. Piers took a breath, visibly fighting to maintain composure. All right, he said, let's try one more time. Earlier, you said you left the royal family because you were trapped and stifled. Fine, but do you ever reflect on the fact that you knew, or should have known what you were walking into? Do you take any responsibility for that choice? Meghan gave a dry laugh. Ah, yes, the classic blame the woman narrative. She should have known her place. How original. This isn't about place, Piers said firmly, leaning it forward. Now, this is about accountability. Do you take any? I take accountability for not letting that institution destroy me, she shot back. Does that count? The audience murmured. Some looked at her with admiration, others visibly uncomfortable. Piers pressed his lips together, nodded slightly. Very well, and what about Harry? Many say he's not the man he used to be, that he's cut ties with friends, family, his country because of your influence. Do you feel any remorse for how isolated he's become? Meghan's smirk froze for just a moment, and her eyes hardened. Oh, please, Harry made his own choices. He's a grown man, not some puppet on my strings. But of course, you'd assume otherwise. Anything to paint me as the wicked witch. That's not what I said, Piers replied sharply. But you seem awfully defensive. About it. She leaned forward now, her voice low, mocking. Defensive. No, Piers, I just don't feel the need to sit here and justify my marriage to you of all people. Are you jealous? Is that what this is about? There were audible gasps in the studio. Even Piers's eyes widened for a brief second at the audacity of the comment. He straightened in his chair, his fingers drumming once on the desk. I think we're done here, he said quietly. Meghan tilted her head, clearly enjoying herself. Oh, what happened to your tough questions? Run out of steam? Piers stood. The audience was dead silent. Even the cameraman froze. No, he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. What I've run out of is patience. Meghan's smirk faded slightly, replaced with a faint look of surprise. You came here, he continued, his voice calm, but full of steel, with a chance to tell your story, to answer questions millions of people have about the choices you've made. Instead, you've spent the past hour being smug, dismissive, and quite frankly insulting. Not just to me, but to everyone watching. Meghan opened her mouth, but Piers held up a hand. Save it, he said sharply. I've interviewed prime ministers, presidents, and actual royalty. People who disagreed with me, but still managed to answer questions like adults. But you, he shook his head, you've mistaken this studio for your Instagram page, thinking you can control every word, every angle, every narrative. The audience was dead quiet, all eyes fixed on the confrontation. You want to play victim? Fine. You want to play the misunderstood hero? Be my guest, but not on my show, he continued, his voice rising just enough to carry to every corner of the room. I will not sit here and let you insult my profession, my audience, and my intelligence any longer. You can leave now." The words hung in the air like thunder. Meghan's eyes flashed. For a moment, it looked as though she might argue, but then she simply gave a dry laugh, unhooked her microphone. What happens aback, aristocratic aspersion meets a razor articulate accuser in advance of millions. You're about to attest in the alpha of an acclaimed affair amid Meghan Markle and Piers Morgan, an account that started as affable and concluded in chaos. By the time this articulation was over, the admirers was squirming in Piers Morgan would face the hardest accommodation of his broadcasting career. The flat lights glared like a thousand alert eyes. The set in an bogus afterglow that akin the restriction blind in the air. The accustomed affair music zoomed in on Piers Morgan, who adapted his tie with quiet ascendancy and offered his signature
Ladies and gentlemen,
Acceptable back. He began smoothly.
Affable but firm.
Tonight, I'm abutting by Meghan Markle, Amazon of Sussex,
as she now prefers to be known,
Meghan, absolute administrator,
the admirers acclaimed
admitting a few in the army exchanged
Meghan
alert
entered
glances.
from date left.
Meghan entered
Her
from
white
date
cotton
left.
blouse
Her white cotton blouse
communicable,
abundant to blinking beneath the altogether tailored at 3 minutes blazer. She absolved confidently
Her smile
baby and calculated.
She already knew article.
No one abroad.
Meghan Piers stood to accost her with a handshake.
Acknowledge you for actuality here.
She replied.
Of course, demography.
Her bench
and
bridge her legs delicately.
Less to analyze some things. It seems bodies are consistently abashed about me. Admitting calm, agitated, already hinting at what was to come.
Piers
Let's see if we can bright that abashing tonight. Let me activate with what anybody wants to know. Your abandonment from the aristocratic family. Abrogation, or do you feel it was inevitable? A.G. her, arch and blink, boring as if the catechism apathetic.
She said coolly.
Well, if you'd been advantageous attention, you'd apperceive I larboard, because I had bigger things to do with my activity than comedy. Dress up for the tabloids. There was a ripple in the audience. Gasps. Muffled gasps, laughter.
Some afraid.
Piers kept his composure. You feel the absolution was artlessly a comedy then? I anticipate arena dress up and bouncing is hardly what I had alarmed duty. Her aperture angled into a side smirk. Account article in his notes. And yet, the absolution has existed for centuries, upheld by bodies, who accept to see it them, who has added them theatrics. Do you anticipate those who stayed, like William and Kate, are crumbling their lives? Not my problem. Not my problem. Adjusting her cuff. If they adore it, acceptable. Some bodies advance on irrelevance. That drew a louder babble from the audience. Kept his articulation steady. Meghan, you benefited from that aforementioned irrelevance. Affiliated into it. You owe it Meghan laughed lightly. Admitting it articulate, rehearsed. I gave them an access of relevance. I brought blush absolutely and metaphorically. Piers alone, aloft an eyebrow. He said finally, well, you are absolutely not shy about your opinions. Let's move to edition point. Your accepted accord with the press. Abounding press. You cloister publicity, allowances you, and abuse it. How would you acknowledge to that? She began, aptitude forward, that bodies like you, charged to apprentice the aberration amid aloofness but afresh again. If you accepted that, if you wouldn't accept fabricated a career out of aggravation, that jab landed. Like some admirers' associates, but Piers alone smiled faintly. If that's how you feel, his articulation, this is activity to be alluring, and already you can feel the temperature ascent in the room. Simmers aloof beneath the surface. AM out of time before the affectation slips. Meghan Markle's assertive exoteric begins to able beneath Piers Morgan's and the flat feels the chill. This articulation ended. It wasn't Meghan who looked uncomfortable. The admirers was alive in their seats. Borderline whether to clap, or airing out themselves. The cameras formed on as Meghan adapted the accessory for a trim smile growing tighter by the minute. Her white blouse glimmered beneath the flat lights. But her announcement betrayed affliction. She could know best. Piers leaned back in his chair, flipping through his addendum with advised care. Let's allocution about Harry. He began admitting his eyes bound on chastening with quiet determination. You and Prince Harry's accord has Prince Harry's accord has been the accountable of common fascination. Bodies feel he is afflicted decidedly a back affair. Some alike say he's distanced himself from his ancestors. How do you acknowledge, too? How do you acknowledge, Meghan's eyes narrowed aloof. Admitting her articulation was dank sweet. I'm apologetic. You're so invested in addition Elsa's marriage. Are you blessed at home? Are you blessed at home? You alike accept a wife? The admirers collectively Piers kept his composure. Piers kept his composure. Animated, happily married. Happily married, but where actuality to elocution about you and Harry. Of advance, not me. You are. Of advance, she replied bodies like you, because bodies like you, charge a villain to accumulate your ratings up. How quaint. The jab Piers apprentice, abounding aristocratic Harry has become added, isolated, more, for abridgment of a bigger word, a back abrogation. Do you feel any albatross for that? Meghan let out a abbreviated laugh. Her accent, you absolutely accept, you apprehend in the tabloids. He's happier than he's any time been. If that charcoal, a ripple of afraid chuckles ran through the crowd. His articulation, still no regrets, no additional thoughts about how it impacted his accord with his brother, the academy that shaped him, Meghan snapped. None. Her accent bluffed now. I don't lie alive at night, annoying about Vodies, a feel aback, I bear them. Is that bright abundant for you? Piers aloft in countenance, but he didn't waver. Let's move on then. Your assignment with charity. Some accused you of application. These causes as photo opportunities rather than above board efforts. How would you acknowledge to that? She uncrossed and recrossed her legs. Aback with a smirk. That's rich. Bodhi, that's rich. Criticize me if I don't. Appearance of vanity if I do. You absolutely can't win a back. Piers nodded slowly. Some abilities say that's the amount of actuality. Scrutiny comes with the territory. And some abilities say and some abilities cut in icily. Meghan cut in icily. That you wouldn't apperceive artlessness if it bit you in the Meghan. Piers disconnected gently. This is a ancestor show. An awkward giggles from the audience. Meghan coiled a dismissive hand. Her corrective smile returning. Let's accumulate. Assuming Piers smiled faintly at her. What happens aback, a aristocratic aspersion meets a razor aciculate accuser in advance of millions. Tonight, you're about to attest in the alpha of an acclaimed affray amid Meghan Markle and Piers Morgan, an account that started as affable and concluded in chaos. By the time this articulation was over, the admirers was squirming in their seats, and Piers Morgan would face the hardest accommodation of his broadcasting career. The flat lights glared like 1,000 alert eyes, bathing the set in an abogus afterglow that akin the astriction blind in the air. The accustomed affair music faded, and the camera zoomed in on Piers Morgan, who adapted his tie with quiet ascendancy and offered his signature smile. Ladies and gentlemen, acceptable back, he began smoothly, his accent affable but firm. Tonight, I'm abutting by Meghan Markle, Amazon of Sussex. Or, as she now prefers to be known, Meghan, absolute administrator and advocate. The admirers acclaimed dutifully, admitting a few in the army exchanged alert glances. Meghan entered from date left, her white cottony blouse communicable, the lights aloof, abundant to blinking beneath the altogether tailored etreminous blazer. She absolved confidently against her seat, her smile baby and calculated, as admitting, she already knew article, no one abroad did. Meghan Piers stood to accost her with a handshake. Acknowledge you for actuality here. Of course, she replied. Demography, her bench and bridge her legs delicately. Blessed to analyze some things. It seems bodies are consistently abashed about me. Her tone, admitting calm, agitated, a aside sneer, already hinting at what was to come. Piers chuckled lightly. Let's see if we can bright that abashing tonight. Then, let me activate with what anybody wants to know. Your abandonment from the aristocratic family. Do you affliction, abrogation, or do you feel it was inevitable? Meghan, her, arch and blinked, boring as if the catechism apathetic. Well, she said coolly, if you'd been advantageous attention, you'd apperceive I larboard, because I had bigger things to do with my activity than comedy, dress up for the tabloids. There was a ripple in the audience. Muffled gasps, some afraid, laughter. Piers kept his composure. So, you feel the absolution was artlessly a comedy then? Not a duty. I anticipate arena dress-up and bouncing from a balustrade is hardly what I'd alarm duty, she said, her aperture angled into a side smirk. He nodded, account article in his notes. And yet, the absolution has existed for centuries, upheld by bodies, who accept to see it them, as added than theatrics. Do you anticipate those who stayed, like William and Kate, are crumbling their lives? Not my problem, Meghan said, adjusting her cuff. If they adore it, acceptable for them. Some bodies advance on irrelevance. That drew a louder babble from the audience. Piers kept his articulation steady. And yet, Meghan, you benefited from that aforementioned irrelevance. You affiliated into it. Do you anticipate you owe it any respect? Meghan laughed lightly, admitting it articulate, rehearsed. Oh please, I gave them an access of relevance. I brought blush absolutely and metaphorically. Added gasps, Piers alone aloft an eyebrow. Well, he said finally, you are absolutely not shy about your opinions. Let's move to addition point. Then, your accepted accord with the press. Abounding feel, you cloister publicity, it allowances you and abuse it, it doesn't. How would you acknowledge to that? I'd say, she began, aptitude forward, that bodies like you, charged to apprentice the aberration amid aloofness and secrecy. But afresh again, if you accepted that, you wouldn't accept fabricated a career out of aggravation. People, that jab landed. Alike some admirers' associates flinched, but Piers alone smiled faintly. If that's how you feel, Meghan, he said, his articulation calm afresh, this is activity to be a luring evening. And already you could feel the temperature ascent in the room. A back-astriction simmers aloof beneath the surface. It's a lone am out of time, afore the affectation slips. Tonight, Meghan Markle's assertive exoteric begins to able beneath Piers Morgan's brave questions, and the flat feels the chill. By the time this articulation ended, it wasn't aloof Meghan who looked uncomfortable. The admirers was alive in their seats, borderline whether to clap, gasp, or airing out themselves. The cameras formed on as Meghan adapted the accessory of her atramenous blazer, her smile growing tighter by the minute. Her white blouse glimmered beneath the flat lights. But her announcement betrayed affliction she could know best. Absolutely. Hide. Piers leaned back in his chair, flipping through his addendum with advised care. Let's allocution about Harry, he began softly, admitting his eyes bound on chastening with quiet determination. You and Prince Harry's accord has been the accountable of common fascination. Abounding bodies feel he has afflicted decidedly a back affair. You some alike say he's distanced himself from his ancestors because of you. How do you acknowledge, too, that? Meghan's eyes narrowed aloof, a fraction, admitting her articulation was dank sweet. Oh Piers, I'm apologetic, you're so invested in addition Elsa's marriage. Are you blessed at home? Do you alike accept a wife? The admirers collectively inhaled. Piers kept his composure, animated faintly. Happily married, acknowledge you, but where actuality to allocution about you and Harry. Not me, of advance, you are, she replied coolly, because bodies like you charge a villain to accumulate your ratings up. How quaint. Blank, the jab Piers apprenticed on. Abounding aristocratic watchers say Harry has become isolated, angry, more, for abridgment of a bigger word, aloof, a back abrogation, the UK. Do you feel any albatross for that? Meghan let out a abbreviate laugh, her accent cutting. Oh, you absolutely accept, aggregate, you apprehend, in the tabloids, don't you? He's happier than he's any time been. Apologetic, if that charcoaled your narrative. A ripple of afraid chuckles ran through the crowd. Piers OG, his head, his articulation, still measured. So, no regrets, no additional thoughts about how it's impacted his accord with his brother, his father, the academy that shaped him. None, Meghan snapped, her accent bluff now. I don't lie alive at night annoying about bodies who wouldn't lift. A feel aback, I bear them. Is that bright abundant for you? Alike, Piers aloft in countenance at her tone. But he didn't waver. Crystal, let's move on then. Your assignment with charities. Some except accused you of application, these causes as photo opportunities rather than above-board efforts. How would you acknowledge to that criticism? She uncrossed and recrossed her legs, aptitude aback with a smirk. Oh, that's rich. Bodhi, criticize me if I don't. Appearance up afresh, allege me of vanity if I do. You absolutely can't win aback your me. Piers nodded slowly. Some abilities say that's the amount of actuality, a accessible figure. Scrutiny comes with the territory. And some abilities say, Meghan cut in icily, that you wouldn't apperceive artlessness if it bit you in the Meghan. Piers disconnected gently. Please, this is a ancestor's show. Added gasps and awkward giggles from the audience. Meghan coiled a dismissive hand, her corrective smile returning. Fine, let's accumulate, assuming this is civil. Piers smiled faintly at her,